Hello guys, and welcome to Seriously Lighthearted Yoga. Today we're going to be talking about hands. Happy hands. Really happy hands. Hi guys, Seriously Lighthearted Yoga. It is hand day. We're going to be talking all about hands. And tomorrow we're going to be talking all about feet, so stay tuned for that. Those are two very important things in any yoga practice. What's the nitty-gritty?
Yeah, so getting into your hands, and I guess kind of your wrist, because they're really hard to separate in yoga, and just physically.
In general, they're pretty hard to separate.
But no, so to get into your hands a little bit, in each hand you have 27 bones between the hand and the wrist, so including the wrist there. 27 bones in each hand, that's a lot. And these have a few different functions in yoga, but often we think of our hands as like our foremost way of interacting with the world after like our eyes maybe. Like we really interact with the world in a very hands-on way. Like that's a thing. And our hands are very versatile, very dexterous, meant to do all sorts of little tiny fine motor movements. So they have a lot of complicated bones in there and structures and things that help us get the rotation and the movement around our wrist and all of those fine little motor movements that you can do with your hands. But in yoga, we may see them either not doing much, as in prayer pose or something in a hand mudra you might see them. These are some ways that we use our hands in yoga, and we might get into those in future videos, but another way we use our hands in yoga is often as weight bearing, which they aren't made to hold as much weight as, like, say our feet are, which are meant to hold our body weight all the time. The bones are off, as you can see, smaller and more delicate in a lot of ways. So when we use our hands in yoga as weight bearing tools, we need to really think of our positioning and make sure we're not stressing them out in any serious way. And a good way to start working on this is just to bring your hand down to the mat and try and flatten it. Try and keep this whole thing flat. So working on the inside and the outside of your hand, all the way from the heel to the fingertips as well. Think of keeping that weight even in all parts of the hand here. And then if you'd like to begin to play with kind of what happens with your hand and your wrist, you can begin to just move around your arm and notice how your wrist shifts as you keep your hand pressed into the mat here. So try and keep it pressed in, but that gives you a really good idea of what that movement feels like, what your arm is able to do. And then, I mean, if your hand can't stay flat, you can bring your other hand down to it just to press it flat. Keep it down. And often this part, this knuckle under your index finger here is the issue. You will find that it might be really difficult for you to keep that flat, but that's an important thing to try and do in many yoga poses. As we saw in Downward Facing Dog just a couple of days ago, if you tent up onto the hand, what happens is you bring a lot of excess pressure out into the outside of your wrist here, and you bring a lot of pressure into the inner wrist here because you're tightening and strengthening all of this instead of opening up and releasing all of that pressure through your whole wrist. So, important point to keep in mind. And then there are certain times in yoga where our hands actually take all of our weight. And if you try and move on to those postures and things, arm balances and such, without a good understanding and a good ability to keep your hand flat and able to bear that weight, you'll find very quickly that you get wrist issues, you might start seeing elbow issues, things of that nature. But again, to reiterate, the best thing you can do for yourself now is work on flattening that hand when it's on the mat. So keeping it flat. And again, that distributes all of the pressure of your body weight that you're putting into the hand, for whatever position you're in, into all of this, as opposed to focusing it in smaller areas. If you tent up your hand, you can only get about this much of your hand onto the mat here, and it's not very much. Mm-hmm. So that can be a big issue because physics, when you apply more pressure to a smaller area, there's a lot more force that goes into that area.
which isn't a good thing. That leads to hand injuries, wrist injuries, and those kinds of things. So this is definitely something that's kind of important, kind of cool, because you can work this over time. You can work this into any sort of pose that you're doing, any sort of posture, so long as you're involving your hands and the mat together. Then you can practice this. You can make sure that your hands stay flat.
Nice weight distribution.
Yeah,
there.
unless you like that. You like that?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Anyway, so hope that makes sense for you guys. If you have any questions, please let us know. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about feet. These guys down here. These guys. Feet. So we'll see you guys then. Subscribe, like, and share. Hope you guys have some fun playing with your hands and figuring out what works for you, what doesn't work for you. But again, you can work on this continually throughout any poses that are involved with a mat and where there's any hand or mat contact.
Not even necessary.
Yeah. So we'll see you guys tomorrow. High five, guys.